Have you felt lately that the joy is dead? Well, on the section of the internet that I'm on, there seems to be this agreement that the idea of joy itself died somewhere in the last 10 to 15 years. You know, joy as a value was something that we used to design for. People, companies, artists would build joy in as an essential component of whatever they were making. But then something changed. Some people blame the internet, some people blame COVID, some people blame politics, but almost everyone seems to agree that life feels different. It feels distinctly less joyous now than it did just a little time ago. For me, that feeling reached its peak in 2020. I was living in San Francisco. The entire city was locked down. There were wildfires, so the sky turned orange. The news was deeply, deeply depressing on just so many levels. There was just sadness all around. It was a very dark place to be. And then all of a sudden, these little pockets of joy started to pop up all over the city. There were these murals of honey bears, and they were on almost every city block. And I know it feels silly to say, but it was beautiful and it was awesome. Every time I'd see one of them, I'd just be a little bit happier, just have a little bit more joy in my life. And the artist that made them did it because he loved the way that those honey bears used to make him feel when he was a kid at the supermarket. And he just wanted his city, my city, our city, to have that feeling of joy baked in. And for this great act of practicing joy, that artist, Finch, became both beloved and reviled in San Francisco. A lot of people felt like he wasn't saying enough about the issues, about the real stuff, as if there was any shortage of that. But that's how people felt. And I think that in a deeply joyless world, just practicing joy alone can be a bit of an act of rebellion. And that man, that artist, Finch, is an incredible, rebellious, disruptive ambassador of joy. I could not be more excited to have him on this podcast. And with that, I bring you Finch. From WeFunder's office on Mission Street in San Francisco, this is Warm Intro. So, Finch, one of the things we do on the podcast when we're preparing for this is our producer, Jiwan, and I will sit down and we try to, we'll go deep in the world of whoever the guest is. And we try to arrive at one sort of central question. Sometimes it's a word or one story that we really like kind of keeps coming up for us. And I want to get your reaction on this, but the word that I kept thinking about for the last, 72 hours that I've been in Finch world is the word joy. I've just been and your relationship with it, your art's relationship with it, what I believe you did for the city, are doing for the city. I want to take this back, and I want to kind of put this in the context of your life. Describe to me, to the degree that you can, what did your childhood home feel like? What did it feel like to be in the Finch household growing up?
Yeah, so I had a fairly regular Midwest middle-class upbringing. So my father worked in sales, my mom worked in a hospital. We lived in the suburbs of St. Louis. When people say they're from St. Louis, they mostly mean the suburbs, actually, due to some poor tax decisions that the city made in the 70s. Mm-hmm. All the businesses, not all of them, but a lot of them pushed out into the county. And so there's actually a second downtown in a place called Clayton, Missouri, which has skyscrapers, and it's in the county. It wasn't like you'd see in the 50s movies, but I still was able to ride bikes around, I don't know, pretty normal. Like, we'd go camping. I'm an Eagle Scout. We'd go to Grandpa's house for the 4th of July, shoot off firecrackers. So I wouldn't say it was totally idyllic. I mean, my parents divorced when I was about 8, which wasn't the best of not on the happiest of terms, maybe. But formed 2 households and was fine from there. And yeah, my parents focused fairly heavily on education. And so I got to go to some of the better schools in St. Louis, and that, obviously charted a pretty good path for me out to Stanford out here. But I kind of had the impression as a kid that I had a job, and my job was to do well in school. And if I did my job, I could kind of do whatever I wanted, which is kind of how adulthood works too.
It is.
Yeah. And so I don't know where I got that idea. I don't think that was explicitly expressed to me, but the policy was definitely like, my mom would be like, "What are you doing upstairs?" I'm like, "Whatever, playing a video game." She's like, "Is your homework done?" Yep. Okay, good. Like, "Are your grades good?" Yeah, Mom. Okay. Do whatever you're doing.
What I'm surprised by is how much I would define my reading of your career as just that, is like, work really fucking hard. I've always found you to be one of the hardest working people in the art scene. Work really fucking hard and do whatever the fuck you want. I think that combination of, if you're doing a good job, everything else can go to hell. And I don't know if you feel that way, but I as a fan and observer, I've always said that.
If I were to, my first instinct on how to map that on in my current life is that if you run a reasonably good art practice, then there's basically excess profits that you can plow into horribly unprofitable but fun projects.
Yeah.
Like everything for Burning Man or anything in public space, pretty much, is not a good business. And so, I'm fortunate to have been able to structure something where the two things can work together, where one can support the other, and I don't have to stress about, oh, hey, I'm going to go, launch the Finch Museum and staff it 8 hours a day for 3 months, but not charge anybody or sell anything, right?
Yeah.
It's like, cool, I can do that because, I've set up something else somewhere else that can support that. It's sort of buying your freedom with, with part of your art practice and then using that freedom. We had
on this really incredible Michelin star chef, Harrison Chaney, and that's a theme that you see with chefs too, is a lot of chefs, the Michelin star restaurant, the 2-star restaurant, that's the passion project. Mm-hmm, and the Vegas offshoot exists so that can continue to live in peace. But I want to, I'm curious about something. If I were to, again, going back to this idea of like, I walk in the St. Louis suburbs, I walk into the Finch living room, the Finch family living room.
Yep.
Am I seeing art on the walls? What is the art?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the answer is yes. And it wasn't, I didn't understand until college that this maybe was unusual. So my mom's family collects maybe more like pastoral paintings, landscapes,
like Norman Rockwell,
rivers. Yeah, not quite as. I don't want to call Norman Rockwell kitschy, but that was the first word that came to mind. Though I love Norman Rockwell, I would love to own a Norman Rockwell. Let's be clear, he's awesome.
Yeah.
But
no Rockwell hate.
Yeah, no Rockwell hate. But yeah, sort of pastoral things. My mom's family also collected some Native American artifacts. As a kid, when we'd be on road trips, we'd go to reservations or whatever, and then they'd be selling Kachina dolls or little stone carvings. And my father, when he remarried, married an artist, a sculptor, and so I both had a sculptor, a working artist who had supported herself before she and my father from her art in the household. So that proved to be perhaps useful for my career, but also not like fancy artwork, but we had there's an Ellsworth Kelly print that we had in the house. There's actually an early John Cave. No, sorry, is it John Cave? I'm going to say it's John, but I could be wrong. Nick Cave. Here we go. I'm sorry, Nick. He's now, I saw him at the SF MoMA with his sound suits, but like way before he was doing that, he did a piece because he's from Missouri that they had, very bizarre piece actually. It was like human hair stretched over a pulley. But there was at least modern art things that they had, and no one else as famous as those two names in the household, but sort of modern art. And so I got kind of a juxtaposition and exposure to those two.
Dude, my parents, the only art we had up were free calendars that like local realtors would give us. So by that measure, I think that's actually more people. That's a lot of art. That is a very healthy, also just range of art to grow up with. Do you remember the first artist that I'm really fascinated by this one moment that happens in, I think, every creative's life? The first artist that just gets you between the eyes and just, it nails you, and that you feel differently about this thing than you've ever felt about any other art.
That's a good question. So the first thing I remember, which maybe is the same as the answer to this question is there was a Shahuli exhibit in the St. Louis Art Museum. And I don't know if you know his work. It's the blown glass. You've seen it. He's one of the world's most successful artists.
Yeah.
You've definitely seen it, even if the name doesn't ring a bell. And so it's all these really beautifully made glass pieces. And he lost an eye at one point in a glass accident, and so he doesn't blow the glass himself anymore.
Wow.
And he's a great quote, which is when I stopped back and was, from having whatever the pipe in my hands that I'd blow the glass with, he said, I like the view much better from back here. Because now he has like 30 people who work for him or whatever.
Yeah.
And so his work gets translucent, and there was a hallway between two rooms where a bunch of his pieces were placed above, and then there were lights above that shone light through them.
Yeah.
And so the ground was all lit up. And that's the first memory I have of seeing a piece and being like, oh, sweet, this is awesome.
How old were you?
I don't remember, 6 maybe, if I had to guess. Probably one could find out by looking at whenever his exhibit was in the St. Louis Art Museum. I don't remember, but that's probably the earliest thing I remember being like, oh wow, this is pretty sweet.
And was it at all on your radar around this time? The son of a hospital worker and a salesperson growing up with a healthy diversity of art at home. Was there any self-conception you had of yourself as an artist, or was that?
Yeah, so I have two answers to this question. I think maybe most relevantly was that, especially on my mom's side of the family, everyone did something. So my grandfather, and you could call it craft, maybe more than art, but my grandfather carved wooden birds. He also made chairs and tables and things like that. I don't know. I don't think so. Not in my memory. Robins. He did more functional things, but he occasionally would do something more artsy. And then my aunt made, my hand-drawn Christmas cards and dioramas and things. And my mom did glass beading. So there wasn't a sense of, and my stepmom was a professional artist. So I didn't have the sense that there are those people who are artists and there are us who are not artists, and there's somehow some difference. There were people in my life who were doing arts or crafts, at a level that was meaningful to them, that wasn't even vocational, right? It was just a hobby, and it's fine to do it that way. And so I don't think I necessarily lost the sense that, I think a lot of these divisions people have where they say, I'm good at math, or I'm bad at math, I'm good at art, or I'm bad at art, left brain or right brain. I think most of it is bullshit, right? And it's just we get reinforcement through our childhood at what we are maybe for random reasons slightly better at. And being better makes you, getting positive reinforcement and investing more time into something makes you better at it. And then the wedge grows over time. And so, this is kind of comes down to the nature versus nurture. But, and I don't have an answer to that question, but I do think there's a big element of sort of like reinforcement and persistence. And so, I didn't have a sense that I was an artist or not an artist. It was kind of like, cool, we make things.
Yeah. One thing I heard you talk about one time that really resonated with me was you talked about that moment that that a child sees someone their age drawing better than they can draw, and how important of that's when the ships diverge, right? Between the people that stick with it and
Spencer Eastman was mine. Yeah, man, that guy could draw Spider-Man.
Shout out Eastman.
Yeah, way better than I could. Yeah, and so I stopped basically, and that would have been something like age 8, and I didn't get back into it again until probably age 13 or 14, when I had a buddy who was working on a video game.
Yeah,
and he was like a prodigy programmer, and they didn't need a programmer, and they needed art assets, and so I was like, cool, like I'll make art assets, and I didn't really know how to do it, so I figured I would do stuff in Adobe Illustrator, and some in Photoshop, and so I just started kind of working at it, and there was nobody else doing digital illustration that I knew at age 14, so I was the best.
Yeah.
Also the worst.
Yeah.
But certainly the best.
No, it's a great thing for your confidence to be surrounded by friends that suck at something and you suck a little bit less at it early on. That's what gets you started, always. Mm-hmm. All the things I kept up with life were just the things that I sucked at a little bit less than my friends.
Yeah.
At what point, when you do this video game art, did you do it under the name Finch? At what point does that, because I know it's a childhood nickname, but when does that appear?
That appears in the 7th grade.
Wow.
So before this, but I actually had a gamer name that I used for the art, and the gaming would have come. I don't know when I got the gaming name. The gaming name was my AOL nickname back when. I'm older than you, so you used to have to pick one name for AOL.
Are you comfortable sharing?
Yeah. I wonder if you could track
love
it.
AOL nicknames.
I wonder if you could track it back to me or not.
Okay. We can cut this out if it's trackable.
Yeah, I doubt it is, but so it was Rothmic, Rothmic.
Okay.
For a really hilarious name, which was in the 6th grade, I was looking for, I guess that's about the time I would have gotten AIM or whatever.
Yeah.
Was it 6th? Maybe it was 5th. And we had assigned to us a book that was Rolling Thunder, Hear My Cry. Mm-hmm. I don't remember anything about the book. I don't remember it being at all meaningful to me, but I just saw the letters and I was like, oh, I like those letters. And I was like, let me just try adding a vowel.
Yeah.
Roth, C, ROTHMC. Let's add vowels in there. It could be Rothmec or Rothmac. Yeah. I got the first choice, which was an I.
This is
and that was it.
This is something that I love about designers and artists. I remember one time, my wife's an artist and a designer, and I remember I was ranting to her about some piece of copy that somebody had written. I was like, this doesn't even make any fucking sense. Why is it shaped like this and all that? And she was like, Chai, designers are not reading the words. They're looking at the shape of the paragraph. And I love that the title meant nothing to you, but you like the shape of it. That's awesome to me. Tell me this. So you go from that, and you end up, you fast forward, let's say, some 11-ish years, and you end up at Stanford, in San Francisco. Was that a couple of questions? One is, I have to ask, I went to Berkeley.
It's okay.
I know, it's...
Go Bears.
The entire point of this podcast is for me to understand how I could have gotten into Stanford. Yeah. It's just all me picking at that wound.
Actually, I can give you the answer.
Please, yes.
The answer is that if the coffee had been a little better the morning your application got reviewed, you would have gotten in. Right? It's that level of...
Yeah.
There's so many kids who can make it there.
Yeah.
And, I can give some ex-post justification for why I got in, but it felt to me at the time like it was kind of a crapshoot, I had great grades, I had great test scores. I went to a really good high school, so the grades actually meant something. And then, I had this experience on this video game. But
you talked about that in your application?
I was like, I've been trying to plug everything I can, baby. Yeah. That was the thing. The buzzword when I got in was angular, which is you had to be both well-rounded and have something about you that was weird.
Oh, like a little bit of edge.
Yeah. Something strange. So I was like, cool, I've got the grades and the test scores, et cetera, but that's just like kind of table stakes.
Yeah.
And then cool, I actually did art for a video game that people actually played on the internet. Not a lot of people. Yeah. But we had a community, and I worked on a distributed team. Before that was cool. I started doing it when I was like 14, whatever it is. So subtract a lot of years. And we had one person in San Jose. We had one person somewhere in Canada. We had one in Los Angeles.
Oh wow.
And we had two in St. Louis, which is how I got wrapped into it. They're my buddy. Yeah. So I figured this would be maybe my chance to write. Yeah. Something that made me stand apart. But even then, I really do think it's about the coffee.
And it's man, I have a similar version like that for Berkeley, which is I think you need to be well-rounded and you need to be all that. First of all, nobody needs my help in getting into Berkeley. You can get into Berkeley if you want to.
Oh, it's a hard school to get into. A lot of kids don't. Yeah.
But the one
Maybe
thing,
we should edit this out.
The one thing I felt like you really needed to get into Berkeley. The one thing you really needed was you needed to communicate at some point with the application that you cared deeply about the world.
Yeah.
And if that didn't come through, your chances with me were like half as good. But so you show up in San Francisco.
Yep.
You show up at Stanford.
Yep.
What did you feel about the city? Were you excited to be here? And especially, I want to hear what you, insofar as you even thought about it. What did you think of the art scene here? What did you think of the way the city looked?
So I'll say while I was an undergraduate and I lived off campus for 2 years, I basically never went to the city. Yeah. Right. Like whatever, the Caltrain is fine, but Stanford is it's a big campus and it's you kind of don't need to go anywhere. And then I moved up here. Not because I never lived in a city before. Yeah. And not even that I really wanted to. Like, Palo Alto's pretty sweet. And I was like, as suburbs go.
This is very surprising to me.
This is a nice
suburb.
Because
you're such a city guy to me.
Well, when I got here, I was like, there's like stuff to do. Yeah. Oh, I get it. But yeah, my friends were moving up. And I liked having friends. Yeah. And so I moved. But I lived off campus for 2 years because I was really, I was graduating during the great financial crisis, and a lot of people went back for a co-term, which is like a 1-year master's, because they couldn't get jobs. And so I was like, well, I like having friends, and my friends are here, so I just lived off campus.
Yeah.
And could see my friends. And then when they all eventually graduated, a year or two later, then we moved up. Everyone kind of moved up. And at the time, I guess I started seeing street art pretty quickly. I wouldn't say I was super art conscious, but what I felt then was that it was sort of like a Statue of Liberty in the sand moment, where you saw that there had been people here doing street art, but there wasn't really a lot going on then.
Yeah.
So Jeremy Novi, the guy who paints the koi fish, had moved away, but some of his pieces were still around. But the Barry McGee's and the Margaret Kilgallons and the Reminisce and Rigo and kind of the mission school people, they'd all moved into art museums, art galleries, Marin, Los Angeles, right? They'd sort of had worked their way out of doing what I would call street art, what they might call graffiti. Our terms may differ, but what I would call street art, they'd kind of, had worked their way out of it. And, even people like, there's still a mural scene that was, going fine.
Yeah.
But even like kind of the last generation of muralists, your Chad Hasegawas and your Victor Reyes's and your Apexers, like they're active, but they weren't like, they moved into galleries too. And, they'd sort of come up from the streets and work their way into a real living. Maybe they have kids now, they have responsibilities. And so they're, have to balance their extracurricular outdoor activities, whatever. And so don't think that there's an artist named Claire Bandersnatch. She may or may not have been active then. I think maybe it was a little bit before she got started, or I just wasn't that aware of her. And then again, a couple things here and there, but it didn't really feel like there was much to me. But you can see that there had been stuff. Like you're like, oh, okay, cool, there has been. And I was aware of stuff from the internet. At that point, I was already aware of Banksy and Invader and Shepard Fairey and kind of the upper tier of, or the most successful.
Oh, this would have been right after so Shepard Fairey, for people that don't know, he did Obey, right? He did Obey, and he did the Ben Davis, the monkey. And if I got that wrong, please.
I'm not sure he did or not, but I cannot confirm or deny that. That's quite possible.
But around that time that you show up here,
he did
does the Obama
poster,
Hope poster, right? And that's the one that everybody knows.
Yeah, when was that election? Was that 08?
That was 08, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't actually move up till 2011. So I graduated in 09.
Yeah.
And then 11 is when I moved up. So, but he's in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And so he came up here and did some wheat paste and stuff. He was just up here like a month ago, but maybe 4 years before that, but certainly not in the era. He sent people stickers, pop up from time to time.
Yeah.
But it was sort of like, also when I moved here, there were like 3 or 4 galleries maybe who were dedicated to what you would call urban art. Yeah. White Walls and Shooting Gallery, First Amendment, Upper Playground had an art gallery at that time, and then you were seeing stuff from like Spoke Art and Hashimoto. They were, they still are actually on and off, but First Amendment isn't really doing shows anymore. Upper Playground shut down their gallery, and White Walls stole everybody's money and fled town, whatever. And so, there were really cool shows. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. The fourth one I'm thinking of is the Ian Ross Gallery. And those were all, I got a chance to experience all of those. But at some point, those have all closed.
Is that a known metaphor, the idea of the Statue of Liberty in the sand? Because that's awesome.
Yeah, this is from the end of Planet of the Apes.
Okay, yeah. That's why it was so familiar.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to, where it's like, there was a civilization here, but it's gone, and, and oh my God, there's Statue,
beautiful metaphor for that.
Yeah, it's like, we can't build it anymore.
But it seems like you catch San Francisco and you catch the art scene at this moment where, I'm going to end up just repeating you, but there are obvious signs of there having been life here, but there isn't really a vibrant, active scene. Or
it's working its way down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the shows I saw at some of those galleries were awesome.
Yeah.
Like, it was really sad when the Ian Ross Gallery closed. It changed its name to Rocha Art, and then the last show they did, Ian painted the entire inside of the building in his style, was kind of like floral, flowy, and it was like a cathedral. And walking in there, it's like a religious experience. But it was kind of the like, hey, running this thing is not economically viable anymore. Maybe because rent prices have gone up so much, maybe because the buyers have faded for whatever reason, or culture has shifted, or, I think there's a whole series of reasons, probably mostly around the cost of living in San Francisco, if I can just propose that as a modest suggestion. But yeah, I wouldn't say it was kind of, maybe it was in transition and I got to see some part of something. The other thing I got to see a lot of, which I didn't think was going to go away because it felt like it was at a peak, was I lived in the Mission for a bit, right as I was after I'd already started doing street art, before I kind of in the period. And there was a sticker scene in the Mission of these hand-drawn stickers that was like insane. And it was like my roommate and I we became obsessed, right? So we would check, when you open a mailbox, stickers would be on the inside, and we'd check all those and every post. And there was different artists that we would that we'd follow who basically would get these stickers and then they would hand draw on them, and they'd put them around. You could know, oh, there's another, Cry Tough or Sad Cloud, or and again, I think a lot of those, that was mostly young people. I think a lot of them moved to Oakland at the end of the day, is my suspicion. Cost of living reasons again. I think maybe they were in high school and then they graduate from high school and then they, either have to get jobs or go to college or, whatever it is. They're not sitting around and hand drawing with a Sharpie 100 stickers back to back to back to back to go out
and then paying so much rent after that.
Yeah. So it's a tough thing, but that was like a really sick thing and to see. And I'm sort of sad that I don't. You definitely still see stickers, but it doesn't feel like it was. And that would have been like 2015, 2016 era was still like going really strong in the Mission.
It also,
which was awesome.
I mean, to me, even your life story, what I know of it, because I showed up in San Francisco 2012. That's when I arrived.
Same time.
And I remember having a lot of conversations with people at Berkeley around just San Francisco the temperature was too high for microbial life, for art microbial life to survive here. It just was, you need to have certain pockets where you could have an artist colony, and you could have 7 people living in a loft and paying $1,000 a month total. And it just wasn't hospitable to that. I mean, and I know that with your life that, you kind of embark on this whole career at this point, and you have to, properly, you work in tech, you have to start companies. For you to be able to live and do your work in San Francisco, you had to go out and actually, to put it plainly, you had to go out and actually make money. You had to actually make this work. And we probably don't want to get too far into the details of the companies you started. But I think one thing that I've always been amazed by with you, and I think it shows up in your art in every way, is you've always had this incredible sense for economics. And just how hype works and how things get shared. And I wonder how much of that came from when you studied economics and then you go on this sort of 10-ish years of like working in tech and
8, I think is accurate.
And I think it actually, like, in the best possible way, it like kind of marbled the product. That I think what we all got to experience and what you did for the city, and I want to get to that part in a second, I don't think it would have been possible at some level if you hadn't spent that time in the business world and learned these sort of, because again, what you were trying to do, I just don't think is quite as simple as like, oh, you make a great piece of art and you just put it out there. I think you had this concept of like, I don't mean to talk on your behalf, but I feel like it was the scale that you were looking to operate at. It just would not have been possible if you didn't have some understanding of the core mechanics of how distribution works.
Yeah. So this sparked a lot of thoughts. Yeah. So at least 3, and I probably won't remember all 3. But I'm going to start with the third that came up, which is that I feel like there's a little bit of revisionist history happening here, where it was absolutely not my intention to be an artist when I got into this. It was just I was in a work situation where I felt stuck. I didn't feel like I could quit, and I didn't feel like I could do something creative there. I wanted to be creative. I didn't want to moonlight on my partners by doing software on the side. Yeah. And so I just started going out and doing street art. And I thought it was going to be like, oh, I was your friend who worked in tech with this cool side hobby where, oh, yeah, he goes out, he's Finch at night and he does some stuff. And even 6 months before I took the art full time, I remember having a conversation with the guy who was loaning me studio space. And he was like, yeah, this is going to work. And I was like, I just don't see how this actually works.
Yeah.
Right. So I spent about 2 years doing it strictly as a hobby with really, honestly, no ambition of having it be a thing.
Yeah.
And then I was able to work my way out of that company in good terms. I actually tried doing one more that, just on my own, that didn't work out. But as I was working on that, I kept doing the street art more seriously. And I kind of flipped into being like, okay, I'm just going to do consulting work just to pay the bills. Like I'm basically going to be a mercenary. And the software work I'm doing is going to be just for money. And I'm just going to get as much as I can in a small amount of time as I can. So basically worked the first week of every month is what I eventually worked it into. Would be software consulting, and the next 3 would be art. And even then, it wasn't like, oh, I'm trying to make it as an artist. It's just what I told people at the time was 2 things. One, I felt like I had a string, and I didn't know where it went, but I was enjoying pulling on
Just
it.
tugging at it.
Yeah. And so I was like, and the other thought was that it would me at 60 look back and be like, I really regret the 2 years I spent as a street artist. And I thought as long as I could say that like future me won't regret actually doing this, then it didn't really matter if there was a global sense to it.
Yeah.
Right. And then when I actually went full time, and I didn't know, by the way, there was about a 6-month period where I was full time, but I didn't know it. So my last consulting client, I knew that they were going to go bankrupt when I got there because I'd seen enough startups to know that this is just not going to work.
You get a feeling.
Yeah. The math that too many people, not enough money.
Yeah.
No product market fit. But they paid me in cash and on time. And so I was like, cool, I'm happy to do this. But as predicted, they went out of business. And I thought I'd get another client. And I actually interviewed with one person. But at that point, I was like, look, I just want to kind of take a break anyway because this was a little bit stressful. Because even though I wasn't, financially invested in it, it's always sad to see one of these things go down. And so he didn't hire me, and I didn't bother to go ask anybody else or look around anymore. And then about 6 months later, I was like, okay. What I had seen was, the sales were basically doubling every year. And I was like, what's going to happen is I'm going to have a dip in the beginning of this year where I'm going to be burning money from my savings. But if it doubles again, about 3/4 of the way through the year, I'm going to net out back ahead, and I'll be okay on the year to pay all my expenses. And that's exactly what happened. And I was like, okay, I guess this is what I do. And then ... So, yeah.
But that experience, I think, is I'm finding from doing this, it's surprisingly common with people who've built incredible things. Is you're doing this one thing, and that's for all intents and purposes, that's just kind of your day job, and then you're doing this thing on the side. And at some point, and it's like every good story, every good like campfire story, right? Where at the end, the guy telling the story goes, "But this fucking thing I told you about at the beginning," and then it comes around,
circles around,
and I love the idea for you that you've got, you grow up in this house with a bunch of art, and it's sort of always bubbling, and you have this incredible experience at the St. Louis Art Museum, but it's it's never a thing that you've really maybe considered being your full-time thing, but you never really, you always have one hand on it, right?
Yeah.
And then
that's fair.
I like that it got to a place where you were like, oh no, but what about this? And you just, and everything else
the
is kind of...
side thing is the main thing.
Exactly.
Oh, shit. I'm trying to go here. Yeah. The other thing, by the way, advice I give to a lot of artists is as I was getting going, there's another artist who was kind of doing street art around the same time, and she basically quit her job and just jumped 2 feet into art. And I don't know, maybe she made it a year or something. And it's really hard to build a career as an artist.
Yes.
Because of just the market size, which I can touch on in a second. But you've heard that it's hard. And when all of a sudden you're burning through your savings at a pretty good clip, then it really either limits the projects that you can do as an artist, or just limits your timeline, right? And I was able to take it from basically working on my current body of work, or whatever you want to say, to full-time was about 4 years. And that's considered to be actually quite fast.
Yeah.
And so that's quite a long time, even the fast version.
Yeah.
Right. And so she just couldn't cross the gap. And I don't know if she would have or she wouldn't have if time had gone on, but she basically ended up kind of stopping making art in any kind of a serious way. And so the fact that I kept, and this is also the same, by the way, for startups, right? Like, sometimes better try to build it as a side project while you keep your job at your big co, right? And, especially when you're young and you can, there's a lot of hours that you can fit in outside of a regular 8-hour day or whatever, and just try to get the side project to a point where it's looking pretty stable, right? Like, again, I I was still looking for clients when I was already full-time. I didn't know I was full-time, but I was still like, okay, I'm going to do a lot better. And a parallel to this, something I heard, I think while I was doing this, was that Tim Ferriss interviewed Arnold Schwarzenegger. And Schwarzenegger revealed that he was already a millionaire from commercial real estate before his acting career began. And so he said, I never took any projects just for the money. I never had to. I only did things I thought were going to advance my career. And I've always felt the same way. Like a lot of artists end up, so there's a whole industry of commercial art, right? Where, your company wants a mural and your design firm designs it. And then you hire a technician to actually go and produce the mural, right? I have the technical skills to produce a mural like that you give me. I mean, within some boundaries, right? There are some set of murals that designers might design that I could perfectly reproduce on a wall. Or I could paint a logo or something on the side of the building. I'm just like, that doesn't really help my art career. So I don't need the money. Especially in the beginning, people are like, okay, would you do this thing for me, this commercial mural for like X dollars? I'm like, well, I charge 10 times that a week to do this consulting work over here.
Yeah.
So it's like a joke, right? It's like, the entire, I made more basically in 2 weeks as a consultant than I made selling art my entire first year that I actually made money doing it, which is 2015, right? I'm like, all the art stuff was like, this is sort of a joke compared to the thing I actually do for money. And that freed up the art stuff to do, like, I didn't need to make any sale. I didn't need to take any project. I was like, I'm just going to do the coolest things I can do. And that ended up being extremely freeing. And I'm thankful that I just kind of kept one foot on both sides.
This is, by the way, I think if people take one piece of advice away from this episode, this is a critical concept. Do not quit your day job yet.
Yeah.
Don't quit your day job. And not because...
Unless you have a trust fund, in which case...
Oh, exactly. Then do whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that in our culture, there is this... We fetishize the moment that somebody quits their job and commits. And that's commits to whatever craft they've chosen, right? But it is... that to me is an emotional moment that you can create for yourself in a lot of... Because what you're trying to create is a feeling of committing to something. You can create that in a lot of different ways. If you're focused exclusively on what is best for the craft... It really helps to not have to immediately apply a commercial motive to it, to not have to figure out how it can pay your bills. And most importantly, this is what I tell founders all the time is, dude, optimize for being able to do this for a long time. Pick something that you don't think you'll get bored of in 10 years because it's going to take 10 years. Build it in a way where the financial model doesn't come into play until much later. So you can kind of just mess around for a little bit. And I think people... are so focused on creating this emotional moment of themselves being like, no, I care about my passion and I need to back that up by quitting my day job. And I just go, find another way to give yourself that hit, man, because you got to you need to optimize for longevity, not that like one moment of, exploding onto the art scene.
It's people have this illusion that they're going to get discovered. Yeah. Right? In arts, like, some...
Mr. Art will call you one day.
Gagosian's going to walk through and I'm going to get the phone call the next day. And I'm like, I got a spot for you in my gallery in New York. Does it happen? Yes, it happens. Is it once a generation? Yeah. I mean, it's I think it happens just enough to where that kind of idea floats around.
At what point did the poodles, or does the poodle come onto your radar? How much were you thinking about it? Because I find it's a seminal point in your story, isn't it?
Yeah. So to give some context, so this would have been, so actually there's some funny bits here. So the first bit that's funny is I move into a place in San Francisco in 2011, and I moved there with my then girlfriend, and the walls are all white. I get to have all my own art, and I buy a really amazing piece from a gallery called Spoke Art, and it was $1,000, and I put it on the wall. I'm like, cool, that's about my whole art budget. There's a lot of wall left here.
How big was the piece?
Maybe 24 by 12.
That's not very big.
Not very big, yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. So then I thought, okay, maybe I'll make some art. And my college roommate and then business partner in my first company had worked at a product design firm in high school and had basically introduced me to the laser cutter as a concept. So a laser cutter is a machine where the computer just tells it to cut a material with a laser beam. And I'd been doing stuff in Adobe Illustrator since high school, and I was like, it turns out that Illustrator is the exact tool, or one of the exact tools that is basically designed to use something like a laser cutter. Yeah. And I was like, holy crap, that's a really interesting thing. And so the very first art piece I made for the house was, there's a website called the Noun Project, and they have icons of like every noun, whatever, right? And so I got like a kiwi bird, a crow, and I forgot the third one. And I had them cut from a company called Pinocchio, which is like a send-off. They have a laser cutter as a service, and I got back these 3 cutouts, just black acrylic, that I mounted to the wall. And I was like, that's an art piece.
Yeah.
But when they send it to you, what you're actually buying is a piece of acrylic that's like 12 by 12. And they send you the excess as well. They give you the whole square. They just tape the whole thing together, and they send you the whole thing. Because probably
So
they don't know.
A stencil, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. I push
my God.
through the art piece, and I'm holding up the empty bit, and I'm like, holy crap, this is a stencil. And then that was the aha moment. And I was like, crap, all these things I've been doing in Adobe Illustrator are now, and I love Banksy already. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
And so I actually did a swan painting on canvas at home first. And I think I might have done the penguin, maybe. The swan was like
I love the
3 or a 4 layer stencil thing that I did onto a canvas that I hung on the wall as well. And then, but I was like, I got to do something outdoors. And I lived near DuBose Park, which is a great dog park. And they had these dog on leash stencils that the city had painted. Lumpy German Shepherd being walked by a bathroom sign dude. I actually make one stencil to paint out the German Shepherd, so just to cover him up and paint him out in gray. And I'm trying to color match the several colors of spray paint I have. And then I basically put in, a well-groomed poodle in its place.
Yeah.
And that was the street art. And, I thought it was whimsical or joyful, as the word you mentioned earlier. It doesn't diminish the meaning of the signage. So I thought it was just like, this is clearly just better than what was there before. It does the exact same functional purpose, but it's got some whimsy and joy to it that will make people happier if they see it. And so that was the beginning of the street art.
I just love, I think your relationship with this city, but I think just cities in general, down to looking at signage that says to leash your dog and to think to make art out of it I personally love that. At what point did the LaCroix cans appear?
Yeah, so that is a while later. So this would have been 2013 that I did the poodles. I think the LaCroix cans were like 2017.
And this is based on an inside joke, is what I've read.
So
can you tell us the joke?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the real story,
okay.
Which is truth is sometimes stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
So there was an individual who just reached out and asked to commission a painting of a can of LaCroix for his house, right? So this is a part of my practice then and now, not a big part, but people reach out and like, cool, I'll paint. I tell people I will paint anything I would paint. So there's a set of things that I would paint, everyday objects, animals, birds, bugs, sea creatures, flowers, etc. And there's a set of things that meet your goals, and we're trying to find something in the intersection, which usually we can do, but not always. And I think he might have had the joke with his friends, so I actually don't know what the joke was.
Yeah.
But he thought it was gonna be funny, and so at the time there were 9 flavors. There are now more, and he wanted 9 cans. And what was great about the LaCroix stencils is that earlier on I had earlier projects. So the lips were the second thing I did after the dog walkers, and I already had the insight that change the colors, same stencils, get a different image, right? So the text on the can of LaCroix changes, and then the colors change, but nothing else changes.
Yeah.
And so I can get, I basically can amortize the high cost of that design work across all of the pieces.
I think you were the very first artist in the world to know and use the word amortize.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can amortize the cost.
Yes, yeah. I think that's the correct usage. If I'm wrong, you can correct me. So I did these paintings for him. He had them framed. He put them in his house, and then I got there was this art space, sadly no more, called the Sub in the Mission, and it was kind of a co-living artsy space. I don't know quite how to describe it. They had a speakeasy downstairs that was totally illegal and somewhat dangerous.
It's a proper speakeasy.
Yeah, proper speakeasy. And then the upstairs, it used to be an auto body shop. People lived in all the little nooks and crannies, and they had a big shared kitchen. And they had art shows, and the guy, Johnny Wynn, that ran it, invited me to do an art show. And actually, a couple of artists, so there's an artist, Heather Day, who's become actually quite successful with an art show after me. There's one called The Most Famous Artist, or Maddie Moe, who had won maybe right before me. So they, were looking for stuff that was interesting, and I thought, hey, I really like these LaCroix paintings. I want to show them. And so I turn to the guy who bought them. I was like, hey, can I come into your house and remove these paintings from your house and put them in an art show and then sell other versions of them that aren't quite the same but are pretty close, which is a pretty outrageous proposition.
And how did he react?
You're like,
to
yeah,
that?
sure.
Oh, what a great guy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I took them out of his house. He already had them framed, so like great. And I called it 9 cans of LaCroix, and I called them soup cans for millennials.
Yeah.
And that basically through a series of luck. So somebody who lived in the space worked for, I feel like it was a music blog, and then he posted it to his Facebook, and then someone from Eater read his Facebook and posted about it. And then somebody from the Chronicle read Eater and posted about it. And then someone from the Washington Post read the Chronicle and posted about it.
And they called you Warhol. It was Warhol soup cans for millennials.
For millennials,
right?
yeah. So yeah, I had the soup cans for millennials like tagline that just kind of like, and this was the moment, to put you back in time, when LaCroix was like, people were calling it startup water.
Yes.
There was like shortages,
Yeah.
right? Like it was like touching on the cultural zeitgeist at that moment. And obviously that's why, the original buyer thought it was interesting. And so you might think, this is something I reflect on some and share, that you might think that making more cans of LaCroix would diminish the value of the original set of 9. But actually, they became sort of famous, right? So before I put them in the show, they're just a painting I did in someone's house that no one would have heard about. But after I put them in the show, he has the original set that sparked the whole thing, that ended up in the Washington Post and in Vice and in Food Network magazine and all this stuff, right? So by any measure, it should actually make his paintings a lot more valuable. And this is one of those things where like people are like, oh, well, repetition, obviously I paint a lot of honey bears. If I painted just one honey bear, then that wouldn't be such a thing. But having painted thousands and thousands of honey bears, right?
Yeah.
It becomes a thing much greater than just the one through the repetition of it. And so I think he was happy with the outcome at the end, and I brought the paintings right back to his house where they still hang to this day.
Well, it goes back to something that we were saying a little bit early in the conversation. But again, you have this economist's understanding. And I don't mean commercial. I'm not saying businessy understanding. You have, and I think it really makes your art, and I have a whole section about Warhol here.
Okay, yeah.
That I will get to. But that's the only artist that I have seen that had that. And I think for him, it was maybe like characterological. It's just kind of like, knee-jerky understanding of it. But I really think that you cannot do the art. You can't do it at the scale that you've done it at if you don't understand at some level, like, how this stuff works.
Yeah.
Because yours is, and they're like Geffen goods and Veblen goods. And, I'm not smart enough to explain it. People should Google it. But there are different types of goods in economics. And how, because of how their value changes in relationship to how much supply there is. And their goods, of course, are general. We think that everything is a certain type of good, that the more supply there is, the less valuable it is. But, economists start to study that there are goods that actually increase in value as there's more supply. And you were the first person I find...
Also, goods where demand increases as price goes up.
That too, exactly. And I think that there's something very, very interesting where you just have this, really incredible understanding of the mechanics of art and how it sort of scales. But tell me this: at what point did the honey bears come into the picture?
Yeah. So before I get there, actually, there's two things I want to circle back on that touch on this again.
Yeah.
So I want to just comment on how doing startup-y things relates to doing art things. So the first thing is, one of the things I say a lot is that I'm not too proud to dig in the dirt. And I feel like if I have maybe a strength that is more uncommon, it is that. It's not that I don't have a small ego. I kind of feel like ego and pride are maybe two separate things, but I'm willing to do things that don't work. I'm willing to try things with a high probability of failure. And when I was working on software in the beginning, right, we just started doing things in our dorm room, right, and just trying stuff out. And we tried a lot of things. And of the probably 30 apps I built with my roommate, maybe 3 or 4 of them were hits, right? You only need 1 or 2, right? Some of the spectacular failures, right, where a lot of effort's gone into them. And I've had art projects that I've put a lot of time into that have been unbelievable disasters in some cases. Just people just really don't like them, or there's a really negative response, or whatever the thing is. And so I feel like that's, if you get too precious about what you're doing and you think that everything you're doing, you really tie your ego up in what you're doing. Then that's a recipe for disaster, because you can't see, what's working or not working, or is good or is not good. So that's one thought. The other thought, and this took me a while to come around to, is that business, I think of as a lens. So you can look at an art practice through an aesthetic lens, and you can say, oh, what I'm doing is pop art, or it's urban art or it's stencil art or whatever, or it's colorful. You can look at, it through a political lens. Oh, it's being done illegally in public space, or he's trying to promote, art for the masses or whatever. Some artists have more of a political bent than others, right? And, you can look at it through a social lens. You can look at it through many lenses, but the business lens is one lens that you can put onto it, right? And as you look at it through that, you can say, oh, okay, doing multiples means, he's got a high fixed cost of designing a stencil and a lower marginal cost of making each of the paintings so you can sell them at a lower price point. The lower price point allows me to sell it on the internet, which means you don't have to see it in person necessarily. You're more willing to take a risk to do it, right? Or it's going to hit an audience that's a more broad audience than if you're making things in really small numbers at a higher price, right? So there's, all these things kind of fit together, right? It's like, oh, an art gallery is, kind of like a sales channel, right? And maybe they're a branding partner. And so these concepts of like unit economics or, again, sales channels or whatever, I guess you call them economic concepts or business concepts.
Yeah.
And the way I think about it is that all of the knobs of business are the same. They're just configured in a different way.
Yep.
So in software, your labor costs might be really, really high, but your materials costs basically zero, right? Whereas in art, my materials costs are like pretty reasonable, like double-digit percentage of, all expenditures might be on wood and cardboard, right? Like paint, right? But the labor cost, hiring an AI engineer versus hiring an art assistant is like orders of magnitude difference in price, right? So it's like, okay, when I need more labor to help me, I'm actually more able to get somebody to help me out in the studio with things because it's something that actually can fit in the economics of my art practice. And so I think artists think that, oh, business is something that somebody else does, and not being like, whether you admit it, accept it or not, what you are a solopreneur in the beginning and you are running a business. It's really hard to start a business. It's doubly hard when you're doing it by accident.
Yeah.
Right? You're just like stumbling around, hoping that it's going to work out. Whereas if you were to look at some basic economic principles, like, hey, if it takes you a month to make a painting and you need to earn X number of dollars a year, then you need to be able to sell it for, X over 12, or your math is not going to work.
Yeah.
Right? You need to figure out something else, right? Like something pretty basic like that are things where if you don't look at it that way, you might find yourself doing things that you think are going to work or currently are working, right? And then all of a sudden you look around one day and you're like, oh crap, like I got to go get a different job or something, right? And so, I would encourage people, like whatever they're doing, just to not find like tissue rejection to it.
Yeah.
And I don't try to center, like, I guess there's part of my art practice that are more commercial in nature and parts that are less commercial in nature. And as I mentioned earlier, I view them as supporting each other. But if I wanted to maximize my lifetime income, I would have stayed in software. Like it's a much, much, much better financial proposition, right? But it doesn't mean that I don't want to think about finances at all. Like, I have payroll, like I have a studio, there's a loan that I have on the studio that I need to pay off every month, right? Like I draw a salary, I have expenses, at some point there's, like you need to be an adult about it and manage it in an adult fashion. And so I think having the startup experience, those were businesses. This is a business. Those weren't just businesses. We were doing things that we just wanted to muck around in college and make stuff we thought was funny, right? Yeah. And at some point, we're like, oh crap, we owe taxes.
Yeah. But I think let's. I'm glad you. Yep. I'm glad you kind of pulled me back to this. I want to hear a little bit more about emotionally how that time felt in your life, where you can't even pretend like you're in tech anymore at this point.
Yeah, right? Yeah. I burned the bridges or the boats.
Yeah, exactly. The boats.
I burned the boats a long time ago.
The boats are fully burnt.
Yeah.
And now you're making poodles and penguins.
Yeah.
How did that feel? What did your days look like?
Yeah, I view my art practice maybe more explicitly now, but I think then too. So what's nice about art is that it's very project based. So in software, you can end up in a thing where like you have a monolith and you keep building Airbnb, we're going to do a version every year. We're going to keep iterating the iPhone, whatever. In art, there's actually projects that I've done that I've forgotten about. Like someone shows me a painting that I made and I'm like, oh yeah, I did make that. Wow. And so I view the wheel as projects come on the wheel and then you do them and they come off the wheel. Usually I have multiple projects going on at once because oftentimes there are external dependencies where I'm waiting on something to happen or for whatever reason, maybe I want to do 3 at a time or 5 at a time, right? And kind of run them in parallel. And there's, how fast you can spin the wheel is important. And then obviously way more important than that is what projects do you put on the wheel? You try to pick the best project you can, right? And so that's kind of how I thought about it for a long time. Is I don't have some. As I said, when I'm doing the penguins and the birds and the other things and the lips in the early days and the first honey bears, there's no conception that this is going to be a professional art practice. There's no conception that if there is a monolith that I have now, it's like a career, right? Maybe you could say a brand or something, but there's now a career that I'm like stewarding in some way, and maybe that's the monolith that exists, and the projects spin and contribute to that. But then I'm just like, what is a cool thing I can do that I think will surprise and delight? Some people are going to find interesting and appealing, or more that I find interesting and appealing, and I'm going to find other people also find interesting and appealing, right? It's kind of my general approach. It's a more like plan my life 2 weeks in advance and hope that it goes somewhere good.
Were you scared this time?
No. I guess early on, I mean, the boats didn't get burned, as I said, for 2 years. Right. So I was doing both the art. No, sorry, 4 years. Sorry. I was doing both the 2 years from when I started taking the art more seriously and doing it with most of my time. There was still a 2 year period where I was still, keeping up my skills. And so when you're a year out of that, you're not that far out of the game, right? And you feel like you could come back. Even now, like when I was an undergraduate, so how I got into doing software at all, like obviously I have a background in math and economics. I learned to program as a kid. I did the CS core at Stanford, so it wasn't like I didn't have programming experience, but I didn't think this was going to be a part of my life. And what happened is that the very first iPhone programming class was offered at Stanford, which was interesting because it was illegal to do. So the NDA hadn't been dropped yet. Wow. And so 2 members of the original iPhone team came to Stanford. They formed this university program, which made us a team so we could actually share information. And then they taught the class. And the NDA was dropped at some point. And I talked to my roommate. I was like, look, these skills are going to become commoditized like pretty quickly. Like, people in India are going to learn them, and they're going to be able to, to charge less for what we do.
Yeah.
And then, 5 years later, hold on, sorry, we're going to wait for the party to go outside.
Okay. This is
the mission, baby.
We've done a half a dozen at this point. We have never had as much activity outside as we have today.
Well, it's Friday. I know.
It's Friday. I think San Francisco's in a Friday mood. Yeah.
It's gonna be funny if they just park right outside the door.
Warm Intro is brought to you by WeFunder. WeFunder created this thing called the Community Round that lets you raise money directly from your community. So instead of going to VCs and rich people, angel investors, you can go straight to your friends and your family and your customers. And, this is not a traditional ad read. I used WeFunder for my company 3 times. We ran 3 rounds in WeFunder. We raised over $1 million. And I found that it completely changed how everybody felt about our business. Our customers all of a sudden didn't feel like they were just customers. They felt like they were owners in the business. They shopped with us more. They told their friends about us. My team felt like what we were doing was important because our community had shown up to invest in us. I tell every founder I can find to go raise a WeFunder round. Especially for companies that care about community, there is nothing greater you can do than letting that community invest. Go to wefunder.com/join to check it out. So the music break is over. We're back to
skills.
You were talking about the boats weren't fully burnt.
Oh yeah.
You still felt like
at this point, which is that. So we thought that our skills on the iPhone were going to become a commodity.
Yeah.
And I started programming with iOS 2.2.1, or maybe it was 2.1. And then, iOS 3 came out, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6. And what we realized is our rates weren't going down. In the cases that we were doing some consulting work, which we did some in the beginning and some later, they stayed the same. And the reason they stayed the same is because being on the cutting edge was not about having skills. It was about learning whatever is coming next, right? Yeah. And so if you're good at doing that, right, even though it helps to have had, I was much better at learning. Like I made the switch into Swift, and I, like all these things came out along the way. And, even though, like even now, if I was like, oh my gosh, this is all going to hell, and I need to go back to this old trade skill that I had, as long as I can learn that thing or whatever the new thing is, right, you can kind of come back to it. So each year that goes by, obviously it becomes harder to do that. And I want to do it even less and less.
Yeah.
But yeah, like 1 year into being an artist, I was always like, oh yeah, I bet I could come back to this. The other thing was I viewed it in part as, this is just another thing I'm doing, right? Like it's just another, it's another business in some way, right? That, if this thing doesn't work, it's not like I couldn't go do something else. And that something else could be kind of anything, right? And the way that your skills fit together, like, did I think that these digital illustration skills from middle school were going to somehow end up being like effectively essential to how I made my living, however many, like 10 years later. This is like the Steve Jobs, you can only connect the dots looking back.
Yeah.
Right. There may be something else where dots make sense that I don't even know about.
Yeah.
Right. That could come together. And so, yeah, I guess I wasn't scared. And I had some, again, I didn't make the transition in until sales were enough to support. Again, I didn't travel and I didn't eat out. Like, it wasn't like I was living super high on the hog, right? I basically was like, look, I want to work the least amount possible, so I'm gonna cut back, on all the discretionary.
LaCroix.
Yeah.
Went back to regular water.
I actually had a soda stream. Like, actually, I never really drunk LaCroix. I always had a soda stream.
Yeah.
And now I have a sparkling water tap at my house. Shout out Zip Tap. So yeah, I don't. The can is. Well, it's more expensive, but that's not the only reason.
I do like the idea
wasteful.
of the study of your career through sparkling water.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's successful when
you had
sparkling water's on tap.
You had to paint sparkling water while drinking regular water until you could get to a point where...
SodaStream is a very cost-effective way to get sparkling water, and I bought the last version that you still carbonated in glass. I think you can do it again. For a long time, they only let you carbonate into plastic, and so I locked in that SodaStream, and I rode that thing for a long time. It's a great product.
Is it funny to you?
Not sponsored.
Is it funny to you that you've become related to these products? Like, and I want to, like the LaCroix can, or actually, at what point do the honey bears kind of come into your consciousness and into your art?
Yeah, so the first honey bear would have been in, I think it was in 2013. Yeah, I just redid a whole timeline of this for a project, and so I think it was like the fourth thing I did was the honey bear. Yeah. And I painted it on a park wall in Noe Valley. And people definitely had a really positive response to it.
Yeah.
Kids would scream at it. I would go back to take photos and stuff and just kind of like linger near my pieces to see how people would respond. And I watched a girl demand that her mom snap a photo of her with it.
Yeah.
And then some Instagram influencer posted it. That photo actually ended up in a book at Urban Outfitters without my permission, which is hilarious and classic Urban Outfitters. So it was clear that something was different.
Yeah.
But what I just realized recently is I didn't do another honey bear in public space for 11 months.
Wow.
So it wasn't like, bam, this is what I do, right? I did a bunch of other projects that year. I did the butterflies, and I did beetles on the ground, and I did the ladybugs, and I did the fried eggs, and I did, there's many things that I was doing. But somehow I came back to it again in 2015, and that was when it started to take on a life of its own and become a more central part of my practice. But it stood out as being special, but not so special that in my head, when I thought about it before I actually went through the photos, I was like, oh yeah, this was the moment when, cool, this thing works. But I was like, no, I don't know why I waited 11 months and why I came back to it at all after 11 months. I don't know.
You can't connect. You can only connect the dots looking back.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's. I think. I'm very struck by your willingness to just try shit.
Yeah.
And just throw stuff at the wall, and let the patterns emerge. Themselves, right? And let the calling, let the craft become undeniable, and let it become. I think your willingness to just try stuff, I think, is very inspirational. And I think there's part of the flaw of the model of what I'm doing here, and I think like any kind of interview does, is try to go back and act like you could see the dots.
Yeah, exactly.
Through, right?
The dots are pretty clear now.
Yeah, that you in your head you wanted to be the
in a very clear way. Yeah,
exactly. Like
world domination through honey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yes, genius.
I want to actually let's talk about the honey bears for a second. I have a ton of my own theories. So, to people that are listening to this outside of San Francisco, I don't think they can fully appreciate the degree to which the honey bears were deeply sewn into the fabric of San Francisco. There was a period, I lived in San Francisco all through this entire period that we're talking about, and you could not go anywhere in San Francisco and not see a honey bear, and we all collectively fucking loved them. Like, it just was, I don't care. People can now act like they were too cool for school or whatever, but it was genuinely a beautiful and joyous thing, and they were everywhere in San Francisco, and I'm so happy to have lived through that. Why do you think they caught on so much? Why do you think that little girl wanted to hug the honey bear?
Yeah.
Why do you think people resonated with it so much?
Yeah, so I think of this now as positive, nostalgic, and inclusive. Are the three words I like here. So basically, as a kid, what do you want? You want sugar, right? And you see that bear, the bear is cute. It's got sugar in it, right? Like, pretty straightforward. We want that thing. We get older. What do we want? We don't have it as much because we now have, executive function and a sense of our own mortality and diabetes. So we don't just, squeeze all the honey into our mouth like we wanted to as a kid. But we still have a lot of affinity for it. It still is quite delicious. Also, obviously, like bees have this whole thing. They're local, and the honey is different in every area, and it's a very natural process. Bees are obviously really important to our ecosystems. But also, there's something that Jeff Koons said, and I'm going to paraphrase here because I won't get the wording exact, but he's like, when you go see a balloon dog, like whatever cultural background you have is enough. So I'm very often, I view my art in opposition to stuff that you'll see in some stuff that you'll see, say, in the MoMA, where I go in the MoMA and I see a mirror on the ground with a pile of dirt on the mirror. And this thing may be worth $1 million, but it makes me feel stupid. Yeah. Because I don't have the cultural background to appreciate that. I don't know all of Chaucer. I haven't seen all the work of Duchamp. I don't even know what it is to appreciate. There's some arc of art history that I'm ignorant of that is required to make that piece appealing to me, and therefore it makes me feel lesser than, or maybe this is a place where I shouldn't be. And a lot of the art world, I think, cultivates this almost on purpose, right? Where it's like, oh no, this is exclusive. This is for us. This is for some set of rich people and or cultural elites. And I have the sense that art is for everybody. You don't need to be a cultural elite to appreciate art, right? And so therefore the honey bear is kind of like this, where it's like, look, anybody can appreciate it. It doesn't have to be, again, you don't need really any cultural background. And so it has a really broad appeal. Obviously, it appeals to children who have no cultural background at all, for the most part, right? And it appeals to people, who, being raised in America definitely helps because honey bears aren't in every country. Yeah. Which is the thing I only discovered when I started bringing my work international. Like I go to Hong Kong and they're like, what is this thing? Yeah. Now I'm like, okay, it's just a bear. Sure. I mean, we like bears in other countries, but I don't get the honey, which makes it a bit of a bigger lift. But yeah, so, but it doesn't matter what your race is or your background is. Like you probably had a honey bear around if you grew up in America somewhere.
Can I tell you my experience?
Yes,
with
please.
The honey bears?
Yeah.
So I grew up in India, and I moved here when I was 17 years old. And it wasn't just the American honey bears, but the honey bears were definitely part of it. I remember the first time I bought honey at an American grocery store, and I remember thinking, they made it cute. Yeah. They made it fun. And that it's at some level, it's an incredible luxury. Because in India, I'm sure it's different now, but like the honey came in like like everything. It came in like the most functional piece of packaging ever, right? Mm-hmm. And I liked that in America we took the time and spent a little bit of money to add a little bit of joy to something that could be plain. It could all be San Francisco could be plain and honey bear less. Yes, right? Yes. But
life's a little better.
Isn't it a little bit better with honey? And isn't it a little bit better when your honey container looks like a bear? And I remember that to me is still so core to my understanding of this country. Yeah, is that here? There's a great book about this that they teach everybody in architecture school. And how you read that book actually tells me a lot about you. It's a book called Learning from Las Vegas. It's in every architecture school in America. But it's a core idea of it is that we shouldn't just be, as architects, it's a critique of American architecture, I think in the 60s when the Las Vegas Strip is just kind of starting to appear, 50s, 60s. And it says, as architects, we shouldn't just be making architecture for ourselves to look at and be amused by. We should be, there's nothing bad about making something that entertains and adds a little bit of joy, adds just a little bit of pep to your life. And I think that's what to me, that's what the Honey Bear original, the Honey Bear
Yeah.
packaging form factor is. That's what I think your art has done so well. And I think this becomes especially true during COVID. I mean, Jiwan and I were talking about this when we were preparing for this. And I think people, speaking of revisionist history, I think people forget how it felt to live through those years, especially San Francisco was the first American city to lock down, right? But you walk through the city and it just was, I mean, it felt so dystopian, right?
Yeah.
It just felt like everything that makes life joyous had now been sort of removed. And it was just, it felt like living in like a massive hospital ward. And at that moment, you start to see these little bits of sweet joy all over the city. And you did this really, I think, again, goes back to your economic brain, but also, like, I think your philanthropic side of you started giving out these honey bears at cost.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I loved in those moments, because the only other thing that people had in their windows was, we support essential workers and all this stuff. And we're in this together, which, again, I support those messages.
Yeah.
But man, could we just fucking take a break from it? Like, can I support essential workers on my own time? Like, it felt like it was, you could not escape the dreariness of San Francisco and of COVID in that time. And I think that's where, to me, the honey bears just take off, especially the ones with the masks on.
Yeah.
Was that your experience, that you felt like there was a bit of like a hockey stick, like an inflection point?
Yeah. So, certainly that was the year where I went from being, so people are like, oh yeah, you started painting these in 2020, right? I was like, actually I started painting them in 2013.
Yeah.
And, sales roughly doubled every year, through those years. And so the last double is a much bigger double, and one that you actually noticed. And certainly transitioned from being someone that you knew of if you were really into the art world or into street art, but you didn't know about otherwise. Someone that was kind of, you couldn't escape it. So for context, at peak, there was a bear in 10,000 unique households in San Francisco itself, which is basically one per block on average.
Oh my God.
Or one per block for every block of the entire city. So you can't get away from it.
Amazing.
Like, I would walk my dog around a block in the morning, and I would pass like 4 or 5, and they don't know that I live in the neighborhood. This is just randomly who had them in their windows. So that was crazy. But what happened? A couple things happened. So I was in a very good position because I was, again, before that happened, I was already a full-time artist. I already had my studio in the Mission. I already had art assistants, right? I was already shipping paintings to many countries and many states. So I was operating at a reasonable level. But what I had was a commercial grade printer. And so the print shops shut down. But there's an art form called wheat paste, where you print your artwork out on a paper and use a wallpaper paste to adhere it to the wall. So other artists couldn't make wheat paste because if they used a print shop, but I could because I had my own printer. And I had an art assistant to go and print, and I actually cut mine out on the laser cutter again. So they actually could print it and cut it for me. And so my wife would go out for runs early on. I was like, hey, there's all these boarded up storefronts, and they're totally, at least north of Market Street, right? They're totally empty, right? And so twice a week, we'd go load up with 20 bears, and we'd go hit every storefront, right? We'd just go down Fillmore Street and be like, or maybe whatever, 3 or 4 a block, and every bear would be different. And if it was an ice cream shop that's boarded up, we'd have the ice cream bear. But to step one step back, the idea of doing wheat paste came up. I was walking around near my studio in the Mission, and I'd done a couple of things. I'd done the soap bear, the mask bear. I just done some masks alone, thinking I would find like advertisements with people and just put masks on them.
Yeah.
And for context, if we can rewind back, at this point, masks were not a political thing. It wasn't, don't tread on me. It was, you just like, hey, we have to flatten the curve.
Yeah.
And masks, why I thought they were really interesting is my understanding at the time, which I think actually is my understanding now, is that they do more to protect other people if you're sick than to protect you if other people are sick. Now, I like that idea of like, hey, I might be sick, and therefore we're going to support each other in this, and it's a communal effort. That I thought was a really beautiful idea. And so to me at the time, masks were sort of this like, we can get through this together if we work together sort of a thing. Again, history has this whole thing out the far side, and whatever it is what it is. But as we're going around pasting up these bears, I found that the only ones I wanted to paint were the ones in the mask. And then the idea came of, hey, what if I do all my bears in masks. So it's a David Bowie bear in a mask, avocado bear in a mask, chef bear in a mask, pirate bear in a mask. I do all these bears in all these outfits. I've been doing this for however many years at that point, 7 years. And so I'd accumulated some number of them. And that was the idea where it's like, okay, cool, this is cool. And then so that's what the project became. Bears, all bears in masks. And it was all the board ups. And so, and then that, I guess I'll just tell the story of how that turned into the whole thing. The next step was there's only so many downtown corridors with boarded up storefronts, right?
Yeah.
I did like Chestnut Street and the Marina, and I went down Castro and the Castro. But a lot of San Francisco isn't those places, like Clement, in the Richmond. And so I was like, okay, well, because I don't want to do this onto like your house or something, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna put out a call with a Google form. You're like, hey, if you want me to do one of these on your home, just fill out the form with your address. And like 500 people filled it out. Wow. And I was like, whoa. So I drove around with my wife and, driving around house to house. But not.
And how much time was it taking you to do one at this time?
Well, so when we're doing a corridor, that can be pretty fast, right? Everyone's taking about 60 seconds just to paste them up on the wall.
Yeah.
And for my time, I was having them all made by an art assistant. So I would just grab 20 of them, and it would take us an hour or two to go, an hour, say, to go and do them. Driving around is a way worse proposition, right? Because it's now like 10 minutes to get to the house, to go spend 60 seconds to put the thing up, to go spend 10 minutes to get to the next one. So this is not going to work. And that was the idea of putting them into the windows, where I was like, okay, I think actually what happened was a nonprofit I'd done some fundraising for called SF New Deal, which was basically paying restaurants to make food to give to those in need. So it supported both the restaurant and those in need. They're like, hey, what if we did one in the window of an SF New Deal bear? So it was holding like a frying pan that said SF New Deal on it. And we put them in the windows of restaurants that are participating. And somewhere it was like, the window is a pretty good place.
Yeah.
It's inside. You can't tag it. You can't rip it down.
I think it being inside did something to it. Because it felt like not to derail you, but it felt like a play of, the honey bear was also sheltering in place.
Yeah. That's interesting. I put that together, but that definitely makes sense. Yeah, so I offered the kits at cost. Again, I thought I'd sell like 500 of them. I'd make a map. You'd walk around. The art galleries were closed. The art museums were closed. It'd be a fun activity. It's a socially distanced activity. You can do it with your pod or your family or whatever, and you can spot them. And then it just went viral from there. And of course, it's inherently viral because you're seeing them in windows. And so we could only make about 700 a week or something. So I shipped, in the end of the day, 20,000, 10,000 to San Francisco, the city, and then 10,000 outside. And I got all 50 states by twisting the arm of Wyoming. I had put out a post. I've got 49 states. Anyone in Wyoming, there's a free bear on the way to you.
This is an anti-Wyoming shout out real quick, which is for my company, we were always trying to get to a place where we'd shipped orders to all 50 states.
Yes.
And fucking Wyoming, man.
I think it's less than one person per square mile.
Isn't it the same population as San Francisco, or even less? I think it's like 600. But
it was possible. Yeah, I had to go out.
I love Yellowstone.
And ask for Wyoming, but yeah. So we only make so many. I was hiring people. Yeah. Just get art assistants in to just tubing everyone, like rolling into a tube and putting on a shipping label, being the whole thing. And so basically, as people were starting to lay off, I was like, look, I'm going to find out of work artists and employ them on this project. And so it turned into a thing that was the way I think about it was like it was like a pretty good idea in a really bad time, and then this like reality is happiness is reality minus expectations, whatever. Expectations were really low. Yeah. So reality, this product didn't have to be like the best thing you ever saw. I say it was like a pretty good idea, but the delta was so big, and people were just really looking for anything that was positive in what was just a very bleak and depressing time. And so I happened to be there and be able to pull it off, basically, and so managed to navigate into something that was, I'm really proud of. And I think, I still get a lot of comments from people telling me that it made a difference. People being like, my kids were too scared to leave the house, but I could tell them we go on the honey bear hunt and then they leave, or, just them taking walks and, just being engaged with the exterior of the city. And
it's very easy to thumb your nose at joyous art when it's good times. And then all of a sudden, it's a global pandemic and everybody feels it. Everybody gets why you need honey bears, right? That's one. But then the other thing is, I think your relationship with the city has always been very, I think, inspirational to me, which is you see this, and this is, in like urban planning, this is a big idea, but like you've always seen the city as your canvas. And at some level, and tell me if I'm overstating this point, but like, I feel like you feel a responsibility as a citizen of San Francisco to beautify it and to make it a more joyous place. And to take that liberty to be like, no, nobody else is doing it. I'm going to
Yeah.
go out and make this more joyous and pretty and beautiful and more fun to be, especially when it's really sad to be. And I think that was a really, thank you for doing that.
Oh yeah.
I truly mean that.
You're very welcome. And yeah, I think, I sometimes think of myself in a parallel to Batman, which is like, I'm not maybe the artist that San Francisco wants. I'm just the artist that it gets.
But some in San Francisco want you.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, I am I'm here, and I was here, and I'm a product of what we're going through as a city and, as a cultural moment or whatever. And I saw that I had the ability and opportunity to do something that, I thought would be cool, at least for me, right? And I guess it just so happened other people agreed with me, like enough of them agreed that the whole thing works, right? But it's maybe not everybody has the ability. Like obviously, I had some technical skills that I were latent, from prior experience. That I was like, okay, I can go make stencils and try to figure this out, and then just felt like it was something. I wanted to live in a city with street art. I'm like, well, I could complain about it, or sorry, with more street art. Say that I could complain about it, or I could go.
Make some fucking street art.
Yeah. So that's what I did.
To turn this to the next topic with another Batman reference.
Okay.
Is
deep cuts.
This idea of you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain. I'm gonna try. I think I've made my feelings about you. I thought you were quite clear on this. I'm gonna try to hold back on my part of this until you're done talking. But what's the earliest memory you have of starting to see pushback against the Bears, against starting to see criticism of your work?
Yeah.
What's the first memory?
So the very first memory, not of the Bears, but what's interesting is I got a mural. I lived for a little bit in the Mission, and there was a PG&E substation at the end of my block that was always getting, a couple little scrawny tags in it, and they'd buff it, and this is the whole thing. I'm like, this is a pretty nice wall. And so I was like, maybe I can get permission to paint this thing. I spent 400 days trying to find my way in. This whole story I won't tell here, but eventually get to yes on the mural. I paint a mural of sea turtles, and somebody goes and tags them and writes Latino art only on it. And that was the first time I'd ever had a thing really noticeably been like, huh.
It was the first time you got tagged?
Well, I mean, that was my first ever legal mural. And so yeah, I think I'd had maybe some of the street art tagged, but it was, I can rewind to that because this was more of a small misstep that got corrected and was fine. I didn't understand when I was starting. I was, in the parlance of graffiti, a toy. And I thought that if I painted something kind of complicated over a tag, that there's like a hierarchy in graffiti where you can paint something more complicated over something else. But I didn't realize only if you completely cover it. And so if you could peek the tag behind it, then that's considered a diss and you're like insulting them. And so I did that with a couple of bears on mailboxes, and then the bears just got destroyed, and then I got the message and I never did it again, and then never tagged one again. Right.
Can you explain this concept to somebody who's very not savvy with this? So the idea is a street artist has tagged something. You as another street artist are allowed to go in and go over it as long as you fully cover it. If you only partially cover it, then it's a diss. So
yes, except replace the word street artist with graffiti writer.
Okay. Yeah.
So street art and graffiti are two pretty separate cultures, but we're coexisting in the same space.
Yeah.
And so I was, watching documentaries and stuff on graffiti and talking to people, and I thought in the beginning that like I was gonna be respected by graffiti people and maybe even like brought into a crew, and there were crews I was seeing that I liked. I discovered later that they did not think I was cool and they did not like what I was doing, and they never were going to, because using stencils in graffiti is really, really, really low. That's like, you're like bottom of the barrel. In street art, it doesn't really matter. You make the art is what the art is. And so in their ethos, but you've seen like a basic tag, someone kind of like scribbles their name, not scribbles, sorry. They use a hand style to depict their name. You can then do something more like some bubble letters, right? So there's a thing called the throw up, where you're going to maybe be doing two colors, like a fill and an outline. You can cover, my understanding is that you can cover a tag with a throw up as long as it's completely covered. And then there's like a piece or a burner, which is going to be a more complicated, multicolored thing. You can cover a throw up with one of those, because you've done something. If you put a tag over a throw up, that's not going to be seen in a positive light, right? And so I thought, hey, I'm doing a 4-color stencil here. It's taking me a long time. Like they tag for like 20 seconds. I'm putting like a lot of exposure and risk here. I can do this over a tag, thinking I'm somehow operating in their system, which I was not. And I just learned that lesson very easily. I mean, I learned it the way anybody learns it, which is they come over and they just like scribble over the bear. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I got that message. And then I never did it again. And now I don't even want to clip a tag. Like if there's some big tag and it like fuzzes out at the end and there's a nice little spot next to it, but there's like some fuzz from the spray paint.
You won't touch it?
I don't want to cover that. I just like, you're doing your thing. I'm just not going to touch it. But there wasn't like a graffiti against Finch thing from that early experience. This was kind of an isolated set of like one day I went out and one day that they got tagged back in 2015 that didn't repeat for a long time, right? And so this was more of the streets figuring themselves out.
Yeah.
The first mural that got tagged was this thing of the turtles, and I ended up having this early experience actually in 2017 of sort of this anti-gentrification. There's sentiment, including what the FBI would call a gang, a group of people who are using graffiti and property damage and other things to try to keep the mission the way that they want to keep it, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a whole experience I went through, that people generally don't know about because it was just kind of happening in the mission.
And what did it look like for you? Just people tagging you?
Yeah, people tagging my stuff. Yeah. And they'll writing things like "We kill yuppies," "We kill techies," "Die yuppie scum," whatever the thing is, right? Like this kind of happened. Yeah, 2017 is when this was really going down. And there was a group called "Keep Hoods Yours," or "Kill Hippies and Yuppies." That was
hippies too.
Hippies too. Yeah.
Oh man, I thought hippies would be allowed to live.
Not in the mission.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So they identified me as being someone that they didn't like for whatever reason. I think probably for obvious reasons. You should look at me. Pretty obvious. And then so this went on for a while. Actually, my understanding of this, I didn't follow this that carefully, is that the members of that group were like, there was like a midnight arrest of like 20 members where they were charged with all these felony counts because they were like throwing rocks through windows and doing all this stuff. Like it wasn't just like graffiti or whatever. But and yeah, I don't know what happened with the case. I think people might have gone to jail or whatever. But there's some amount of property damage being done on a systematic enough level that eventually the government stepped in and was like, okay. And I was just one, I wasn't actually part of this court case. I was just, part of the damage that these people were doing. That was just, this was a thing that was part of my life. And so the kind of like the public space, being a thing that has some context to it is a theme of street art in general. And there's a quote from Shepard Fairey. He's like, "I've survived generations of haters." And certainly like, if you know about Banksy's work, he basically can't keep a piece up. There's he does it. He gets his photo of it, and then it's pretty much instantly destroyed unless you put plexiglass over it. And so I thankfully don't have that status where now things are pretty calm. But yeah, I've gone through like what you're probably thinking of in your head wasn't probably what I told you, because I've gone through like waves of this over time where you're getting I'm getting wrapped up in larger societal forces, right? I could probably tell you about what I'm guessing you were thinking of, but maybe you weren't. So I just did a timeline again of all of my artwork, and I had sort of a narrative violation where I thought the first really bare pushback was, like when that happened, it was actually much earlier than I expected. So I did all this stuff in COVID, right? And then I sold the mask bear as a painting from an edition, a bunch of them. I actually did it as a timed edition. Anyone who wanted to order the mask bear or the soap bear within a day or 7 days, whatever, I'd paint them and donated half of that to charity. And then I sold all the artist proofs, which were the extras, and gave all that money to charity. And this ended up being a fair amount. I don't want to get the number wrong, but $160,000 or something.
Wow.
I think 100 of it went to basically direct cash transfers to artists. So if you're out of work, there was a nonprofit called the Safety Net Fund that just kind of no questions asked almost was like, you say you're an artist who's out of work, performing artist, etc. We'll just send you a direct cash transfer. And then the other one I mentioned already, which is called SF New Deal, which was paying the restaurants to make food. So I had the masks and the bears in the windows. Everything's going great. And then George Floyd gets killed. And I'm like, okay, I've had so much success fundraising over here. I'm going to go do something for Black Lives Matter. And I launched what I called the Zero Bear, which was a bear that was all 5 layers of spray paint of the regular bear, but all those layers were black, sort of inspired by Blackout Tuesday. And to make this clear, this is a bear that is entirely black, okay?
It is a honey bear.
It's a honey bear in shape. But and if you look at it at an angle, you can see the bear in it because spray paint has a depth to it.
Yes.
But each of those layers, instead of being yellow and then brown and then more brown and then light yellow, whatever, as to make a classic honey bear appear, this was black on black on black on black. And actually, there was a piece from Takashi Murakami around the same time. He did the exact same thing, a flower all black.
We were all doing it on our Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought this was cool. This would be a chance to fundraise. The piece was actually pretty cool looking. But another artist who also does bears and also does some street art stuff said that this was a bear in blackface. And as soon as he said that, like, I made a couple of mistakes, but one of them was just responding at all. So as soon as I respond to a comment on Instagram, the algorithm then takes that to promote it to the top.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this goes viral. And again, I'm getting death threats, and I'm getting I'd already sold $100,000 of these things, and I had to refund them all. I had to hire a crisis PR firm because this is starting to become like a pretty serious amount of negative attention. And this one artist got to have his day in the sun and feel like he was doing a good job, whatever, stopping racists or something. But yeah, so I actually put this piece in the latest sort of perspective of my work because I wanted to be like, look, at some point. In the beginning, you're like, well, maybe I am bad or something, right? Like I am, I have sinned in some way. And then at some point I'm coming around being like, I actually just think objectively, this is not in blackface. And a lot of my friends who are black are like, yeah, this is like total bullshit, like whatever. But it's one of these times where everyone was really sensitive. And, I just had to basically take the L and just be like, okay, well, maybe fundraising in Finchland is better when it's a natural disaster than when it's a social issue. Because when it's a social issue, now I'm inserting myself, who is not black, right, into an issue of which, I'm trying to help in my own way, but maybe not the way that they want to be helped or whatever, or it's a complicated scenario. Anyway, so that ended up being the first time that like shit really hit the fan in a way that seemed frankly existential to my career. And ended up being fine. And, my best-selling painting best ever sung edition was like the year after that. So it wasn't like it had some big negative career impact, but that was the first time that I was like, okay, the kind of like, to make it more, to the best of my understanding, that the more progressive left of San Francisco, the people who would protest against AI and the Google buses and
put the cones on the
Waymos and stuff, right? Like there's a set of people in the city, the KHY guys, anti-gentrification, et cetera. There's a group of people in the city who want it to be a certain way. And I am, for better or for, either correctly or incorrectly, as being viewed as being on the other side of that. And they're going to be upset with me in the same way they're upset at Google, at the same way they're upset with Waymo, the same way they're upset with every startup that's in the city, except I'm just more public because my work's actually on the street, right? Like you can go get angry, you can shake your fist, at OpenAI, whatever, right? But you can't really take down ChatGPT, right? But you can shake your fist at the honey bear and you can take a spray can and you can go destroy every honey bear in the city, right? And so I think I was sort of a more public face of this, societal issue that San Francisco is going through.
Yeah.
All right, by the way, if I can take one more aside,
please.
Here, I think the actual problem, there's many actual problems, but poor housing policy is where I want to put my money, right? If we, let me describe to you 2 streets. I'm going to call them Nice Street and Mean Street. Yeah. And there's 2 universes where in one of them, and they're exactly the same. Every atom is the same. But in one, everyone on the street is nice to each other. And in the other, everyone on the street is mean to each other. Which one has higher rent? Nice Street,
I would guess.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you make something nicer, when you add a cool restaurant or a bar or something, right? When you have artists doing cool artwork, like demand is going to go up. And if all the atoms stay the same, if supply stays the same, then price is going to go up. And when price goes up, certain people that we think have an outsized cultural or societal impact are teachers, even as people who grew up in the neighborhood, right? Who may be coming from a broader, just even from a randomly distributed economic background, but people want to start coffee shops or play music or be artists or be teachers or be firefighters or even work for the city. Like most people who work for San Francisco don't actually live in San Francisco, which blows my mind, right? So if you don't change the atoms, right, and increase the supply of housing, which the city has made it legendarily tough to do, obviously very famously tough to do, then at some point rents are going to go up. And you can blame the people who are making it better, or nicer or more desirable to live in. But that feels to me to be kind of the wrong place to put your blame. Like, I don't feel like the honey bears are what's ruining San Francisco, right? If it's truly actually being ruined, I think San Francisco is pretty awesome. But, I would rather, but understanding that, like, look, when all your neighbors, like, you don't want your neighborhood to change. And so when there's a giant apartment building that proposes to go up, on the corner and you block that, like realizing that you actually are doing the damage to yourself because, like you living in the neighborhood are also doing cool stuff that's making it more desirable to live there. Right. And so, I feel like I'm being blamed on one side, but I feel like, I'd like to put my blame on the other side as being like, look, if we just built a lot more housing, the prices would have stayed the same and all the cultural producers could still live here. And so I feel like they got the wrong guy. But for better or for worse, this is a part of my story. And, I have been intertwined with this in San Francisco, by the way. In Chicago, I was in Chicago when this is all going down, and they're like, people in your city have lost their fucking minds. Like people that like San Francisco has a reputation on the national stage of being just totally insane. Right. Like, and so that actually works in my favor in some ways. Like, okay, actually you must be good if like the crazy left is, is upset with you. Cause that must mean that you must be at least slightly left, it's not even like I'm on the right or something, right?
It's always a near enemy, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's maybe too long of a description of this, but that's at least, how I view what the situation is. And again, I've had waves of this come and waves of this go. Actually, I'll say a couple more things about this.
Please.
As long as I can. So there's two, the thought I've really come around to that helps me contextualize this is that there's a quote from Ali Wiesel. He said, "The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference."
Yeah.
So the worst thing as an artist that could happen is someone sees your work and they don't even really see it at all. You paint a mural, a street art piece, and they just walk right by. They hear a piece of music and doesn't even grab them at all. And what I've discovered, even in the software that I was doing, is the stuff that we did that worked well also had people that absolutely hated it. And so there's indifference on one side and there's love and hate on the other. And so I had a sculpture that I built for Burning Man in 2023 called Nothing for Sale. And it was a giant tube man like you'd see at a gas station and the text down the front said "Nothing for Sale." And it was, I think, the world's largest single tube man. And Burning Man put it in Keyhole, which is like the most prominent art. It's like right in front of Center Camp, the most prominent art location on the playa, except for the man in the temple or whatever, which is like this honor. And some people were just like, even before I got out there, people were pissed, right? They're like, oh, it's like, the death of Burning Man, whatever. And I was like, this is going to be one of my greatest projects ever. I was like, now I've learned to interpret, if somebody I really respect, by the way, is upset with something, and I'm happy to sit down, frankly, with anybody, but it's come to a point where I now actually use that as signal. There's another quote I like from Rick Rubin. He's a legendary music producer. He said, "Great art divides the audience."
Yeah.
So I'm not claiming that my art is great art, but art that is great will have people who are like, basically, it's either going to have nobody be happy with it or upset with it, or have people who are both happy with it and upset with it. And so in the beginning, I'm trying to make art that's happy, right? It's like honey bears. Like, I'm trying to broaden, reach the masses with art, and really do something that brings art to everybody, that is, low cultural background required, very inclusive for a broad community. Yeah. If someone is upset about it, that hurt a lot. And now the way I think about it is kind of like, well, it's just part of the game, right? And people think that Andy Warhol was the death of art, and Picasso was the death of art, and I think Banksy is the death of art, right? And everyone's the death of art, right? And so anyone who had any actual impact. And so at the time, I was upset about it. After some therapy, I'm now more likely to be like, okay, I think that I understand that it doesn't mean that I'm bad, or even that the art's bad, and it might just be like 1% of people that are just super noisy. And so I've come to peace with it, and even use it as a positive signal that if someone is upset about it, then maybe, this could mean that I'm on the right track. Because if no one's upset, it means that I'm not on the right track. Yeah.
Man, I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of questions about that. There's a couple I'll do a quick assortment, but there's a place I really want to focus with this. One that I think point you made that I think people forget very easily, the word gentrification on its own is not a negative word. Gentrification is a good thing. It's when it's paired with the lack of affordability. I mean, I'm saying in a technical dictionary sense, it's a neighborhood becoming better. It's a place becoming better. It's really when it's paired with bad housing policy and people getting priced out, that's when it starts to become a problem, right? But gentrification on its own, it's about beautifying a neighborhood and making it better to live in. That's one thought, and I think, again, going back to the idea of joy and going back to the idea of beauty, like you've always made such a real attempt to make this place more beautiful and more joyous. So that's one thought. The other thought that comes to mind for me through all of this is, at some very basic level, most people, most artists included, could only ever hope to be so big to get canceled. To be so relevant. For it to be worth anyone's time to cancel you is, and I don't know if you like to use that word with what was happening.
I say attempted to cancel because I now think you only can cancel yourself at some level.
That's a big idea.
Yeah, but there have been maybe 7 attempts or something. I don't know what you want to say, but I just keep doing stuff. Like I think if I'd worked for Google at that time in the cultural climate of the 2020s, I would have gotten fired. And a lot of people did a thing at random insert big co here and got fired for it. Palmer Luckey, sort of famously, was just a Republican at Facebook, but no one can fire me because I just work for myself, right? And as long as my collectors, and I kept going to like events and being like, is somebody here gonna come and yell at me? And then realizing that all the people that I really like, my audience, the people that I hang out with, all my friends, all the people I see on a regular basis, they all think it's crazy, right? And then being like, oh, interesting. And that was like, oh, it's not. It feels like the internet can make it feel like it's everybody, right?
Yeah.
And it's just it's a band of people that work together to make a lot of comments on one Instagram post, and they go from pack to pack to pack, and they do it. It's a whole weird social media. Thumb slightly down.
Well, you've had this experience with social media that I think a lot of people hear about. I'm always fascinated by how much we talk about cancellation as a society because of how few people actually go through it, right? Like, again, there are not that many people in America or in the world relevant enough, big enough to actually get canceled. But I want to focus on a very human part of all of this, which is I suspect we will agree on almost everything about like the criticism, where I think it falls short, where I think it's misguided. But I want to hear very specifically about what it feels like to get a death threat. Maybe we can do these as bullet pointed things. Mm-hmm. What does it feel like to get a death threat? What does it feel like to work on a piece of art for hours and then walk back out and see it tagged? Let's focus on those two, or maybe the third one that I would love to also hear about is what does it feel like to think that you've been building something for a long time and it's starting to, in front of your eyes, starting to disintegrate and fall apart. And especially when it feels like it's happening for malicious reasons. But maybe break those three out.
So I don't think I got this idea from myself. I think I read this somewhere where, we evolved, let's say, in tribes. And if somebody in your tribe is really upset with you, then that's a signal that you need to take pretty seriously. But now that we have this, like, someone's upset with me who really doesn't know me at all, it still feels like they're, in my neighborhood or in my village or whatever. But they're not. Like, maybe they're not even in San Francisco, or maybe whatever. Like, social media has allowed it to. We still are monkeys doing monkey things.
Yeah.
And we have our monkey responses, but the inputs coming in are like totally disjoint from our monkey upbringings, right? And so it feels really bad, right? I remember when the blackout bear thing happened. I was on. I cried. Somebody called me up to give me advice, and I just wept on the phone with him. And then I thankfully was going to a friend's house that was staying at a winery over COVID. So I'm like, the only good option here is just to drink myself into total stupor. I was like, I'll deal with the rest of this. At this point, I can't do anything more
alcohol
today. I'm not saying this is the best way to handle it, but that night, I'm like, really, the only plan I have for tonight is just, thankfully, we have a copious amount of wine here. I'd say very much not good. And over time, you basically learn to harden your heart and to deal with it, right? And I have it way lighter than a lot of people. like someone like Mark Zuckerberg has been through just ridiculous. Again, you can like him or not like him, but the amount of hate that guy gets, and I'm only being accused of ruining San Francisco. He's being accused of ruining the world.
Yeah.
Right. It's like existential to society, what people think, and at some point, you just learn, like everybody who what happens at some point is, the mental challenge is you're like, hey, I have this idea for a good project, right? And if it works, then it's going to draw people's attention, and that attention is going to draw people having a negative reaction. It's then going to come and hurt me. So it's like, if I want to go reach something that's going to be good, I'm actually going to hurt myself. And then you see yourself be like, well, maybe I don't want to reach for something good at all, because then I definitely won't hurt myself, right? And then insert expensive therapy here, right? And you're like, no, okay. You start to work on reframing it where if you can basically, again, can try to understand the broader context of what's happening and be like, look, these aren't, not everybody needs to like my art, right? Other people have other agendas, like if it's that they can use my art to, like a great example is all these people throwing paint and soup onto famous paintings, like the Van Gogh, whatever, for climate change. I don't know if you've seen this. This is like a meme in the world. I have this idea that I haven't done yet, or I don't know how to do it, but imagine a giant balloon of carbon that if you destroy a painting in an art museum, I'm just going to release a gigaton of carbon into the atmosphere. Whatever. If you're like, look, you got to stop this, right?
Yeah.
Like, it has nothing to do with the art, right? But they're basically using that to further, they think they can get, and they have been successful in using that to platform their own message. And it's really nothing to do with the art at all, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a whole bunch of reasons for this stuff. Sorry, that was your first question. Your second question was, so there's a song from Jane's Addiction called Mountain Song. Coming down the mountain. Yeah. Every time I go to fix a mural. So at the end of the day, like street art, it's, if it's a mural, it's private property and you should respect private property. If it's street art, it's in public space and what goes. But the ethos of it is just get up, stay up, right? And so at some level, someone tags a thing, I'm gonna go fix the thing. They tag a thing, I'm gonna go fix the thing, right? And I just played Mountain Song on the way to every time I have to go fix a thing, you just like crank up some loud punk rock music and you're like, fuck you, right? Like, you're not gonna stop me from doing my thing. Like, you don't speak for the city, you don't speak for, the larger community abroad. You might be, a lot of graffiti is just 12-year-old boys with a bad home life just trying to get out and do stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's not all social justice, warrior, whatever, trying to save San Francisco. A lot of it is people who are pissed off, right? And maybe they have a bad situation. Maybe their bad situation is caused by the fact the city has made some bad decisions in its policies, right? And they just want to do something because they feel powerless, and fucking up a bear is the best thing that they got, right? But fuck you, right? Like, this is not the most productive thing you could do with your time, And so that was the way I dealt with that. Again, thankfully, things have been pretty calm. Again, it goes through waves. And then you had a third question, which I've already forgotten.
Which is the feeling when it feels like the thing you've been building for decades at this point is starting to come apart.
Yeah. So there's times when it's felt like it's been, one of the times I went through one of these cycles, only once have I actually lost projects. Most of the time, I remember I was about to launch a thing with Williams-Sonoma where they worked on a whole collection of spatulas and mugs and plates, and they were going to put it. And they did put it, by the way, spoiler alert, in every store in the entire world, including Dubai and Kuwait and all the places they have stores. And then something happens that's in the news, right? And it's like, whatever, Finch sucks, whatever, right? And they call me up and they're like, every year someone makes the Hater's Guide to Williams-Sonoma. And they just make fun of all of our stuff and they call us bougie or whatever. They're like, we get it.
Yeah.
We think this is stupid. We're behind you. Full steam ahead.
Yeah.
But I had a tech company that I was about to go do a big project for that was like, I already worked on design. I didn't charge a design fee because, sometimes I do, but I was like this, usually, oftentimes for these projects, they're not interviewing multiple people. They're just like, you're being hired to do this project. And, it's a big enough project that I'm willing to do some proposals. So I already had a design ready to go. I won't name the company. But they were like, okay, well, we don't think that this sends the right message to our employees or whatever, right? And that's only really happened once. Of course, I don't know projects that I didn't get because I was never asked to do them. But that was the only time when it was like, kind of disappointing. And I was like, okay, well.
But even if you put the project part of it aside, right? Like, did it feel like your message was getting ripped apart? The thing, and I know you. I don't think you love that word message, but what you were trying to do in the world, did it feel like that was getting horribly misconstrued?
Yeah, if they can basically pervert the symbol where it was a thing that was sort of like 99.9% of people thought was a joyous object and 0.01% of people, or 0.1, sorry to get that math right, thought was not good. They can taint it for some percentage of the rest of the people, then yeah, that's definitely disappointing. I think that's probably what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, the reality is that tainting is only happening within their sphere of influence, right? Which is maybe San Francisco, right? I remember I had a really big project happening in Palo Alto, and, you know, and I was like, am I going to lose this project, right? And I realized that, like, who reads the fucking Chronicle, right?
Yeah.
Like, nobody reads this anymore. Like, I was at one point, I was on the front page of the Chronicle. It was San Francisco bitterly divided over honey bear art.
Yeah.
Which is like an Onion article. It's like an Onion article. Honestly, it's like we don't have bigger. Even when I bought the paper in the corner store, the guy was like, "Can you believe what the Chronicle is writing about?" I was like, "I know, I can. It's me."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, it's you. Oh, good job, whatever."
Wow.
Right. And I'm in Palo Alto, and like no one there has any idea what people are talking about, nor do they really care. Right. So like we have again when it's, and I have other friends who've gone through some stuff. Right.
Yeah.
I feel like there's kind of like a support group of people who've been, you know, been canceled on the internet or whatever, or had cancellation attempts on them. And when you're in the middle of it, it feels like the world's coming to an end. Yeah. But when I see other people go through it, like I remember the SF MoMA had something happen during COVID where they were being racist or not. I don't even know. Like I cared so little to actually read these articles that I was just like, look, they're doing something over there. You know, I just it didn't seem like this isn't like Bill Cosby. Yeah. Like tier bad stuff, right? This is not Harvey Weinstein or whatever, right? Like that stuff becomes clear to you, you find out about it, and you're like, okay, you know, I don't want to support this institution or that institution, right? But a lot of this stuff is like, they feel horrible, they're in the center of the maelstrom. And so now if I advise someone who's going through this, I'm just like, look, you know, it feels like everyone is talking about you, but most people just don't care, right? And if they are looking at this, like I got a really big project this year where the person was like, oh, I found you when all those people were angry at you being successful. And that's how he actually found me. Wow. And I was like, okay, cool. Like you read the same article I read, and your interpretation was, oh yeah, I get what this is. And so, you know, would I rather the whole thing not happen? Sure. And I think at the end of the day, people try to assassinate Dolly Parton and they try to assassinate Taylor Swift. Like she drives around in a bulletproof vehicle, right? Yeah. It's just kind of like haters mean you're famous. Yeah. Right? Like you said, like, you know, I got to a certain tier of popularity and I got what comes with that tier of popularity. And some people decide that they don't want to go. And again, I'll say this very clearly, not that I'm totally blameless, that I handled every situation to the best of my abilities. It would have been nice to have a big enough institution to have a crisis PR team and get crisis coaching and get all the things that people get so that they can respond better in certain moments and, you know, try to have the most decorum and poise that they can. Right. But, you know, being me and doing the best that I can, whatever. Right. Like I did the best I could. I'm still here. Right. And my career is going well. And, you know, like it's just, you know, you go through the thing. And I think now I have a perspective on it that feels healthy. At the time, it felt like the world was over. Right. And that this whole thing, like I felt like it was existential to the art practice that I was going to have to end the whole thing. Yeah. But, you know, here we are.
Man, I want to do something. I want to read out a few quotes that are written about you. And we've never done a rapid fire. Okay. But if you could just give me your quick couple word or even one sentence feeling about this. The first one's actually a very easy one, and we already talked about it. People referring to you as Warhol's soup cans for millennials.
Yeah, love it. I love Warhol. I like soup cans, and I like millennials.
Beautiful. Number 2. San Francisco has become so oversaturated with Finch's honey bears that what was once an occasional sugar rush now feels like a nausea-inducing force feeding.
Yeah, so having a bear on every block was a lot of bears, right? You know, what's too many? Yeah. You know, I didn't put the bear on every block. I made them available, and the citizens of San Francisco chose enough people, again, more than one per block for every block of the city, decided that they thought that was a thing that they wanted to have in their window to be part of this project. Again, it wasn't like I force-fed this to anybody, right? Yeah. I just enabled this to happen. It wasn't me going to every block and putting something up, right? I just merely enabled it. So again, I have sympathy with that feeling where if you don't like them, Now you can't escape them.
Yeah.
But, I don't like advertisements.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of them.
Well, it's a little like walking into people's homes and seeing that they're using honey and being like, you know what, this is getting to be a bit much. And like, well, nobody told you to fucking.
Or, to make maybe a more charitable interpretation, it's like a person being vegan and thinking that, like every time they see a person eating meat, they're like, I feel sick, I'm upset, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, painting honey bears and killing animals aren't, kind of in the same universe here, but I'm trying to be sympathetic to the idea. There were a lot of bears, right? I mean, it was a lot of bears, and they came down in the course of time as they faded in windows, and stuff with COVID started to fade out, et cetera, and so, So anyway, I'm sympathetic to the claim, but I don't feel like I'm to blame for that. People wanted bears. I gave people what they wanted.
Speaking of, let me give you number 3.
Okay.
His public pieces made the city a more cheerful place to be.
Success. Yeah. Again, that's what I'm going for.
Number 4.
It's just honey bears, people. Come on. We need the whole thing looks ridiculous. Again, it reads like an Onion article.
That's what it
right?
is.
Yeah, it reads like an Onion article, right? At the time, I understand it was a weird time. We were on a witch hunt trying to find people who were, tearing apart the world, and there were people doing very bad things, whatever, right? But there's a lot of collateral damage, and I'm not sure. Again, I think they kind of got the wrong guy on a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure I was who they're looking for, but again, I think enough people understand that it doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? Like people hate Taylor Swift too. And they think her music is terrible and it's ruining country or it's ruining pop or whatever, right? And Taylor Swift keeps Taylor Swifting. Well,
you've set up number 4 perfectly. Number 4, and the very last one I have is his art reeks of commercialism. ... Their contribution to art is nil.
Yeah. So, what is or is not art? It's a topic I actually really like, because Duchamp. More or less. So Duchamp is this artist, if you're not familiar. His most famous piece is the urinal he hung in the gallery called Fountain. But before that, he had Shovel, where he just bought a shovel from a hardware store and he hung it up. So ready-mades, whatever. And Duchamp is a version of Shovel just sold recently. I forgot what it sold for, but it was millions. I actually saw a version of Shovel at the MoMA in New York. And frankly, I thought it was amazing. It was like hanging in the middle of a room. And it's just a shovel bought at a hardware store. But this whole what is art or what is not art or who's contributing or not contributing, every body of impact is called not art as it's happening. Everybody, right? Again, they thought that Warhol was the death of art. He's contributing nothing to art. He's, absolutely it's just it's tiresome because if you're at all a student of history, you realize that, again, saying this doesn't mean that it's good. In the same way that saying great art divides the audience doesn't mean that if something divides the audience, it is great art.
Yeah.
But these comments are going to be levied against have been levied against everything that has driven art forward over as long as we have art history, right? And so I find the whole thing just to be you can say, I don't like it, right? Let's have a debate about what you think is good or not good, and see if you come up with a framework for what you think is good or not good, and you can have a discussion with people on reasonable terms about the kind of art that again, is, if there's even a objective good or bad, right? Whatever, that's a very reasonable thing to do. But saying no contribution or whatever, who cares, right? It's just yeah.
Well, let me pull up my only surprise for the day.
Okay.
That last quote was actually the New York Times about Andy Warhol.
Oh, hey, there we go. Okay, I feel justified. Yeah, they did say that about Warhol.
Oh, I love Warhol as a model for you. I've been thinking about this entire time that I've been preparing for this episode, and I'm not trying to gas you up. I'm not trying to sort of be too, overly complimentary. But I think that there's an analogy there, or not an analogy. There's a parallel there, and I think people misunderstand this. They misunderstood it about him, and I think they misunderstand it about you. And we can kind of break this out in a lot of different ways. One is the fact of repetition, right? Mm-hmm. What is the art trying to do? I think that is, you cannot, I genuinely believe you cannot criticize any art without first asking the question of what is the artist trying to do? What is the art trying to do? And what Warhol was trying to do, as I understand it, obviously didn't know the guy, but what Warhol was trying to do, and what I understand, and you've described today, you were trying to do, is to create little bits of joy that almost anyone can relate to, and to make them ubiquitous or near ubiquitous, right? And to beautify the world that you live in, right? You cannot do that without repetition. You cannot. It is a very different thing. And I do think that there's this bias that people had in the 60s, and I think our generation has this bias towards, I think we don't even consider something art, and I think this was happening in the 60s too. We don't consider something art unless it has some sort of deeper, subversive political meaning, either that, or it's like, this is a piece about my father's depression. Like, and I would love to see a piece about your father's depression, and I would love to see subversive art. I'm a big fan of both of those things, but it is just a fact of it that people unfairly attacked the one folk musician in Greenwich Village that was making happy tunes in the 60s, and people unfairly attack a honey bear that's just trying to make the city a more joyous place to be. And I think people misunderstand it. I think people misunderstand the idea of blending in the way that Warhol did with the Campbell soup cans and you did with the LaCroix, of blending an object, a motif that is in everyone's life with art, right? So you can relate to it, and then putting it everywhere. And I think the more I read about your story, the more I think I think Andy would be proud.
Oh, thank you.
I want to ask you one final question to end this whole thing. What is the future for Finch? Do you see yourself 10 years from now? Are you still making honey bears? Is that fully phased out? What do you know? And you can be as abstract with this as you want.
Yeah.
What do you see your life 10 years from now?
So I'm going to give two answers. I'm going to give the narrow answer about bears, and then I'm going to give a broader answer about the Finch career or something. So people sometimes ask me, like, do you get tired of painting bears? Right? And when I tell them that the way my art practice actually works is that the art is in designing the stencils, which happens on a tablet. It's called a Wacom Cintiq. It's a screen with a pen, right? So I have a bear, and then if I'm making a bear with a coffee cup, I'm not redrawing the bear. I've already drawn the bear. I'm drawing a coffee cup, and then I'm putting the cup in the bear's hand. The actual production of the painting is merely a technical process where many layers between, for a bear, between 5 and 18 are being filled with spray paint. It's allowed to dry, and then that's repeated, until the image appears from that, right? What's actually being filled with paint doesn't matter. You're just filling it with paint, right? So that's purely technical. The creative art aspect is in designing the stencils themselves. So when I'm making all these honey bears, I'm not actually drawing bears. I'm drawing coffee cups, and I'm drawing, pirate hats and baker's hats, and whatever the thing is that I'm drawing, it's never the bear. The bear has already been drawn. So I can make that an image of a coffee cup blown up big, or I can shrink it down and put it in a bear's hand.
On that point, I do want to linger on this. This is another Warhol parallel that I really think is very salient. People forget how novel it was he saw what silk printing could do.
Yeah.
And how mass production became core to his. So that's why when I see somebody call you a copy paste artist, I go, "Oh, you completely missed the fucking point, didn't you?" Right? Copy paste is the point.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, no, maybe not copy paste, but mass production is the point.
Yeah.
But sorry, I derailed you.
Even more than Warhol, I'm actually literally copying and pasting a bear between two files to make it the template for the next bear.
Yeah.
There was copy and paste as part of my art practice.
Yes.
Right. I'm like, cool, this bear looks good. I mean, I've updated the bear 6 times now, and it's gotten better over the years. But it's 10 years and 6 updates. So from a purely logistical standpoint, there's a misconception of art that many artists are doing the creative act and the production at the same time.
Yeah.
They have their canvas and their brush, and they're making the art, and they're producing it. And in my practice, and in many practices, they're actually completely separate, where the creative practice is happening in one place, and then the actual production of the painting is just technical, right?
Yeah.
It's not that it's easy, right? Spray paint comes out really fast, and there's ways to use a can, et cetera, but it's purely a technical production thing. So will I be making honey bears in 10 years? I don't know. The answer is probably, because I'm not getting bored of making them, because I'm not making bears. I'm making coffee cups, right? And other things like that. In terms of the broader vision of Finch as a career, it's I feel now like I'm in sort of a mid-career period where I was new and hot at one point. Yeah. I was sort of underground. I had a show in 2018 that was line down the block. Stampede of people trying to get in. And I've had shows later where I've, had much more commercial success in them, i.e. sold more stuff, but not had kind of the I'm not new and hip. I'm a millennial. We're having kids. We're not trying to find the coolest place to go on a Saturday night anymore.
Yeah.
But I'm also not yet a blue chip artist in any way, where I'm doing, shows in art museums and I'm just here to stay over some longer time period that might exceed my death ever, right? I'm somewhere in the middle, and this happens to every artist. Artists who have the privilege get to this stage where it's just sort of like a weird middle stage where, I have a career. It's probably not going anywhere. I'm probably going to keep doing this for a long time because people seem to be liking what I'm doing on some level. And there's whatever network effects and things that help out. But, I don't know if I'll make that last transition. I don't know what of that is actually a thing worth striving for. Like immortality is an illusion because in the arc of time, like it all gets
Nothing
compressed
matters.
out. Yeah. And then who cares? I'll be dead anyway.
We'll all just be a mound of dirt at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're all the pile of dirt on the mirror. So there's some of that that's like illusory and is going to drive unhappiness. And there's some amount, as I mentioned before we started recording, that reaching for brass rings, like having a solo show in the MoMA, is also a thing that if you reach for that and you don't get it, is also going to lead to unhappiness.
Yeah.
So I have the wheel. I put projects on the wheel. I spin the wheel, right? That's what I've been doing. So what I'm going to continue to do is try to pick projects that I think are interesting, that I hope other people find interesting, and keep doing them. And if people keep finding them interesting, then I'll have the privilege of continuing to do this stuff. And if they don't, then someday I won't. And that's kind of that's the arc of time.
Well, Finch, as a San Franciscan, I hope you keep doing it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast, man.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Best one yet.
Oh, thank you.
That was, I unfortunately am about to miss a flight. So.
Okay.
Warm Intro is produced by Jiwon Moon. Audio and video by Jin Han. Production help by Danielle Ibarra. Hosted by me, Chai Mishra. Cool.